Good day. My name is Dave Glover. Welcome to part 2 of the RSA Netwitness UI walkthrough. In part 1, we covered creating rules. We covered creating reports, dashboards, metagroups, and just walking through the UI in general. Today in part 2, we're going to cover device collection, bringing logs into the RSA Netwitness suite. We'll also walk through creating real-time alerting rules. Let's get started. First, we need to log in. Upon logging in, we're greeted with our familiar dashboard. We had built some of these charts in part 1. In order to set up device collection, we first need to navigate to the config on our log collector. We do that by going Administration, Services. Once here, we find our log collector that we want to configure. In my case, I'll use my virtual log collector, so we click here. Once we're into the system screen, which is where I can turn on and off collection for specific protocols, such as file reader, ODBC collecting from databases, Windows, VMware, and so forth. Let's start by going to config. Then we click on event sources. At this point, we need to choose what type of device it is that we'd like to collect from. If you're configuring the log collector on the local log decoder, and you'd like to be able to receive syslog-based logs, such as from a firewall or from a Unix machine, there is nothing to configure, as the log decoder by default has syslog enabled on it. However, if you'd like to be able to collect syslog-based logs on a virtual log collector, we do need to enable the syslog listening protocol. We do that by clicking here, select syslog, click plus, and here we need to select whether we want UDP or TCP. There is no issue running both TCP and UDP on the same port. Let's first select UDP. Click OK. I then click here, click the plus, and I define what port I would like to use. In our case, we'll use 514. We can do the same for TCP-based syslog. You need to click here on the plus, select syslog TCP. We then click here again, click on the plus, and define the port. In my case, I'm listening for both TCP and UDP-based syslog on port 514. That's all we need to do to be able to capture logs coming in over syslog. We will cover parsers and enabling those in a little bit. If I would like to be able to collect from Windows logs, using the WinRM protocol, I drop down here and select Windows. We support Windows in a multitude of ways. Here, we are going to configure the WinRM connection, or Windows Remote Management. If you have Snare or Event Reporter, both of those agents can send syslogs to the log decoder with the Windows logs. It is an option for you. However, to collect from Windows, we need to do a couple of different things. In a single domain, or in this model, we'll do a single domain. I click on Kerberos Realm Config. I click plus. The Kerberos Realm name has to be in capitals and has to be the full domain name. The KDC needs to be the host name of a domain controller. In my case, EX2008. That is all that's required for the Kerberos Realm config. Once we do that, we then change the config, or change to config, we click plus on the event categories. Here we will define the set of credentials that we'd like to use. The alias can be anything you'd like. I prefer to use the domain name in the alias name just for simplicity. The authorization method will be negotiate. Anytime you are collecting from a Windows device that's part of a domain, you must use negotiate. What would we like to collect from? We can either pick specific event IDs. We can exclude event IDs. We can exclude entire channels. In our case, we'd like to be able to collect from the security, app, and system logs. There is a problem with one of the Windows event messages, which is the 4661. This message comes in corrupt and corrupts the entire log package. So I'd like to exclude that. The way I do that is I type in the channel name, and then I use the caret, open paren, 4661, close paren. That's for excluding event IDs. Now let's finish this up by adding the system and the application logs. What's the username we would like to use? In my case, I'll use the administrator. The username must have the realm connected to it. And again, the realm has to be in all capitals. Now we type in our password. There is nothing needed to change on the poll, either the cycle or the number of events per poll. We can set up a polling interval, such as every 60 seconds. And now we click OK. This now defined the username and passwords that we'd like to use to collect the Windows logs. Once this is done, we then click here and we add in a host. The host can either be added in via IP address or by hostname. In the advanced config, you can override certain channels and certain messages in addition to what was defined in the domain config. However, in this case, we were not going to be doing that. And now what we do is we click Test Connection. From here, we can see that the connection is successful, and we're able to collect the Windows logs from this host. A couple points to note. We will communicate to the KDC, the one that we defined in the realm config. This is done over the Kerberos port. We then, from that KDC, receive a ticket, or a Kerberos ticket. We then present that to this host. You notice that the transport mode that I picked was HTTP. We support both HTTP and HTTPS. It should be noted that in an HTTP transport, the credentials are still encrypted. It is just the XML package that comes back with the event logs that are in the clear, much the same way that all of your firewall logs and your Unix machines are sending their data. To set up the Windows host for collection, because this is not enabled by default, you will run the script that RSA provides on each and every machine that you would like to collect from. There is also a guide on how to set this up in a group policy so that there is no need to run it on every machine. Let's move on to collecting from a file-based device, such as Blue Coat, or in the case that I have listed here, IIS. What's involved in that? First, we need to click plus again to select the event category that we'd like to collect from. There are things such as Blue Coat, Apache Tomcat, as well as a whole host of other devices. This list will be available to you on the RSA community device configuration page. It will walk you through which to collect from. However, in our case, why don't we collect from Apache Tomcat? So we select that. Again, we click on Apache Tomcat, click on Sources. What directory would we like to send the logs into? This is not the directory in the host. This is the directory on the log collector where you'd like to receive the logs. So in our case, what I like to do is I like to put in the host name of the server that's going to be sending the logs. Therefore, if you have 10 Apache servers that are sending, if you were to just put in Apache, and then Apache 1, 2, 3, and 4, you may never know which directory is for which host. So in our case, we'll put www host 1 or Apache 1. There is only one of those servers, so and that's the host name, so it's very, very easy to figure that out, which directory is which. Now we need to define the address. The importance of this address field is this is what will show up in device.ip. This does not have to be, although it normally is, the IP address of the system that's sending us the logs. There have been cases where you have 2 or 3 that work together and they have virtual IPs. Again, it's the designation for what shows up in device.ip. You can very simply do this, or you could legitimately put in the proper address. I recommend the proper address as it makes life much, much simpler. Once you do this, you then need to go in here and you need to paste in the SSH key that you generated following the guide when installing the agent. I have already generated the key, so let me paste that in here. It is important that when you paste in the key, it's all on one line. Now that that's complete, we click OK, and now we will run our test from the Apache server. It's that simple. Other types of devices, such as Blue Coat, will follow the same procedure. Click plus, select the Blue Coat or Blue Coat ELF TDM. Same process, plus what directory I'd like to put it in. Go down here, and then paste in the event key, or the event source SSH key. It's that simple on setting up devices to be captured. Now, once we set up the devices for capture, we need to make sure that the parsers are turned on and enabled. We can do that in one of 2 different ways. We're already here in the Services tab. We can click Change Service and select our log decoder. As we all know, the log decoder's job is to parse logs. From here, we'll click on View Config, and we see the service parser configuration in the lower right-hand quadrant. And from here, you can select the parsers that you want to enable. If you are collecting logs and you do not have the parser enabled, you will have an unknown device type. For example, if I forgot to turn on IIS and I was sending IIS logs in, they would show as unknown until I enabled the IIS parser. To make sure that you always have the newest parsers, we go to Administration, Live, Search, Resource Type, we'll select the log device, Search, then from here, select the parsers that we'd like. There is no harm in downloading all of the parsers and having them all available within the system. The easiest way to do that, click Select All, subscribe. Once the subscription has been built, just click Deploy and deploy them onto your log decoders. That's it for being able to collect logs. Let's move on to one of the other tasks that we wanted to do, was to build alerts for account changes for Windows. This is a very simple correlated rule where we select a bunch of different message IDs, and we want to be notified when that happens. We start off by going to Alerts, Summary. We can see we've got some alerts that have triggered off. Click on Configure. This is the rule library for all the rules that have been brought down into the system. This is not the list of activated rules. However, some of these could be active and some of them not. To find out exactly what you have for active rules, under Deployments, click your deployment name. This may be different than what I have here. Then we see ESA rules. From here, you will see all the ones that are active in your ESA system. In my case, I have things like brute force logins, RSA endpoint with audit log cleared, file transfer using non-standard ports. So how do we actually start building these? Well, the first thing I want to do is go back to the rule library. I want to build a rule that looks for account changes in Windows. So where do I start? The easiest way to start is by finding the events in the investigator. Let's go ahead and navigate over to Investigation. We see the last 24 hours, and this is configurable for data down below. Now, in our case, I'd like to be able to look for account creations or deletions, as those are the ones I want to alert off of. There are a few different ways to do this and to approach this rule creation. If you already know the Windows reference IDs, perfect, you can skip this step. However, in my case, I don't know what those are. What I can do is I can look at Investigator. There's a meta key called Alert ID. There's also other keys such as Event Description that could be used. Or if you know a user that has been just created, you could go and look at that data. However, in my case, I don't know any of that. So I'd like to use the Alert IDs, and we can see right here we have account created. We also have account deleted. So if I go to account created, we can see that we have our Windows device, and we have an account created. And we can see that we have an account created, and if we scroll down, we can see our user that was created, a bad guy. By right-clicking, open a new tab, we can view all of the meta that was generated by that event. So in this case, we know that it's a reference ID 4720. Now, in reality, many different pieces of this meta could be used in the rule creation. Let's go ahead and use the 4720 reference ID. Let's go back to our alert creation. We're going to click plus. Now, we have two options here, Rule Builder or Advanced DPL. If you want to build the statement yourself, we could very simply choose Advanced DPL, and that will allow you to actually just write out your alert or the conditions. However, in our case, we're going to use the Rule Builder. Upon selecting Rule Builder, I'm greeted with a few different options. First thing I need to do is I need to call my rule or give my rule a name. We'll call this Windows User Account Changes. Here's our conditions. Give a name to our first condition, or in this case, this may be our only condition. And then we need to select whether one or all of the conditions are met. Now we're going to list off a couple of different event IDs, one for user creation, one for deletions, one for account changes. So therefore, if one of the conditions are met, so this will basically be an OR statement. We want to choose the reference ID. Just for quick reference, we see that that's the key in use here. So we know that that's the key that we need to choose, as that's the one that generates the event IDs that we're looking for. You could have, if you wanted to, select the message ID, but you would need to put this entire text into the value. So we'll do reference key. We've got a couple of different options, is not, contains, begins, ends. In our case, an is perfect. We want to use 4720. It's not an array field, and we want to ignore case. Clearly, this is a number, not really need to ignore case, but it's a default value. Let's add a couple more. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to let you know that reference ID 4726 is a deletion, and 4728 is an account change. That is the construct of my rule. Now, if I'd like to deploy notifications when that rule triggers, I've got some options. I can email, I can send an SMP trap, I can send a syslog out, and then I can also run a script. For this initial trial rule, I'm not going to do any of those. I then save the rule as the rule is complete. And now what I could do is I could go over here, and to find my rule, I can simply just type it into the filter up top. Here's my Windows user account changes. If I just go ahead and drag that to the ESA, you'll see that there's a little red exclamation point. So I go ahead and click on this, and it will show me, if I click on the Show One Updates, that we want to deploy this rule. So now I can click on Deploy Now, And what will happen is that rule will then get deployed and activated within the ESA system. You can also see the number change from 42 to 43. That rule is now running, looking for those events to happen. If I want to create a different type of rule, a sequence rule, such as, let's pick something very, very simple, 3 failed logins followed by a successful. So in this case, we can give our rule the name 3 failed logins followed by success. And now we need to define our conditions. Our first condition, after we give it a name, so we'll do 3 failed, will be the failed logins. Again, we would have looked in Investigator to see what the events are, what they look like, and what keys they reference. In our case, we're going to use device type is, as we only want this from our Windows logs. We're going to add another condition. We're going to use the taxonomy to build this rule, as we don't know the message IDs. We're going to use EC theme, and you'll understand what these are as you walk through Investigator and take a look at the EC theme, activity, category, and outcome. But we'll do EC theme equals authentication. We'll do EC outcome. So that's now our failed logins from Windows with a theme of authentication and outcome of failure. Click Save. Now we want to add our successful. Again, we're going to pick our device type. We'll add in our EC themes. And then our outcome of successful. Now we need to be able to glue these together, so we'll put a connector followed by. The reason for the two join are same. If you wanted to join different meta keys between the statements, that's what you would use. For example, I have an IDS message, and I want to notify if an AV trigger gets fired off after the IDS signature gets logged. So therefore, in the IDS signature, the host that we're concerned about would be the destination address. However, in the AV system, the host IP address is listed as just IP. So now we have destination IP from the first message and an IP address in the second message. We need to join those. So if I click join, I would then define the two meta keys that I wanted to glue together. Now we want to do a group by. We want group by on the username, as that's what we're looking for. 3 failed logins followed by a pass from the same user. And then occurs within what time period? 10 minutes. Again, notifications I'll turn on after I get some successfuls on the rule to make sure that it's behaving the way that I'd like. Once you fill in the pieces of the rule that you want, we click Save. And now again, go back into my rule library. Here's my 3 failed logins. Drag that over. Click here. If I want to see what's going on, close, click Deploy. Now that we've deployed, that rule will then become active, and if those events happen, the rule will trigger. So what does that look like? If we click on Summary, here's our user with our Windows management alerts. This is very, very similar to the one that we just created. We can click on that. Here are the 4 triggers that we had. Go ahead and double click on that. And now we can see all the information about that. So this was a user account was deleted. It'll tell me what user it was that was deleted and so forth. So in this case, the malware user was the one that was deleted. we look at the first event, or the first alert, we can see that this user the bad guy user was added to the PCI admins group. So that would have been emailed off or notified some other way. So that wraps up part 2. We covered device collection. We covered creating rules in ESA. I hope you found this informative. Please put any comments down below in the box. Thank you.